All right, this is Infosec Decoded, number 56, open source insulin, starting with Elizabeth with the Taliban.
Yes, so the Taliban has come into possession of some biometric identification equipment, and this is not a good thing because over the past several years, the United States have been using what they call the biometric automated tool set and the handheld interagency identity detection equipment, which is basically a portable biometric data collection and checking set up where they've got a laptop and they've got, like fingerprint scanners, iris scanners, stuff like that. And they check iris scans, fingerprints, and facial. Then they use facial recognition because they take a picture of you also.
So this way, the Taliban won't kill the wrong people.
Well, yeah, that's sort of unfortunate. That's the main
You wouldn't want them
problem.
to kill the wrong person, would you?
Well, yeah, so that's the issue. So essentially they are using this to go around looking for anybody who's worked with or supported the Americans, and that's problematic for a lot of people because
But what they said was all they wanted to do was forgive you if you worked with the Americans, and there's nothing to worry about.
that's what they said.
Yeah, that's what they said.
Yeah.
You doubt that?
I don't think it's working out that well for a lot of people that they find.
That's what people say.
Yeah, I think it's pretty dire for folks who are discovered to have had any interaction with Americans or their allies. So,
Well, our whole withdrawal was based on the fact that this is the kindler, gentler Taliban.
yeah, I mean, I was really convinced when those guys forced, terrified newscasters to say, to tell people not to be afraid of the Taliban and everything's cool. So,
Yeah, well, we're going to see. Of course, there haven't been very many reports of them slaughtering people yet, but I guess there won't be because they silenced all the news sources.
correct.
But do you think they can actually? You think they actually need biometric data to identify who is working with the Americans? I mean, this is kind of the problem. Everybody's been openly working with Americans for like 20 years.
I don't think they need it, but I think it helps. And I think that it also is a really good way to, I think it's a really good way to terrorize people. And I also think that if they're using data that was pulled from the Afghan government and or the Americans, it's a really good way to incriminate people in kangaroo courts before you execute them.
I guess. I didn't think, well, anyway, we'll see. I don't think they need any high-tech aids to do all that, but anyway. All right, so Kaitlyn has got, thank God, the kids won't be poisoned by those video games anymore.
Oh, exactly. So The Verge has an article written by Thomas Ricker about how China is restricting kids, or actually anyone under the age of 18. So, okay, kids. I'm sorry, teenagers, kids. To 3 hours of online gaming per week. And this is coming from the government down. So, I mean, it'll be a crime to for kids to play more than 3 hours a week. And so the idea is that if you are a child, you are limited to about you're limited to gaming between 8 and 9 p.m. on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and maybe, some holidays. And that's it. And the reason that the government is doing this, and I kid you not, is because they said that online gaming is a quote unquote spiritual opium. So anyway, the point is that China is now training a new generation of hackers who are going to go and bypass all these security measures so they can play their games.
Well, you got a point there, but I think that this would be a hit with the Republicans here when they're done spreading COVID. This used to be the big thing: stop kids from watching TV and playing those video games and everything.
Yeah, it's like the most boomerish thing I've ever seen China do.
Yeah. Well, also they're getting rid of like billionaires and stock market and Bitcoin. China seems to be sort of done with this nonsense. And I have some sympathy with it. I'm kind of fed up with a lot of this nonsense too, although not the video games.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a moral crusader, but I do believe, maybe we should have a few less billionaires and a few more free healthcare, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. So, we'll see. As our system collapses, the Chinese system ascends, and it does have some virtues mixed in with all the horrible abuses. Anyway, so Irvin has got no more single factor authentication.
Yes, the CISA is telling everybody, please stop using single factor authentication. Please switch everything to multi-factor, especially for those things that are facing the internet, to find some way to have two-factor authentication, because they are getting tired of getting hacked, getting tired of people using the same password everywhere and other bad practices. So they are pushing for everyone to use multi-factor authentication.
Well, they're not wrong. This is like telling kids not to play video games. I mean, it's telling you to brush your teeth,
Right. It's definitely a good practice. The question is, how far will it get implemented?
Yeah, this reminds me of there was a guy on Twitter yesterday saying he knows that a company is about to get clobbered by ransomware, but nobody will listen. And they don't think they're in trouble. They don't believe anybody that tells them. And I said, I've done this before. If you get all the big names to knock on their door and they ignore them, then all you can do is like cook popcorn and watch them burn. So anyway. All right. So at least they can say they warned us. You shouldn't use single factor authentication.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, and Alan has got Adobe.
Yes, Adobe has, since abandoning Flash, developed its very own in-house economics department, apparently. And they have released a report on inflation in the online digital economy. And it's the only report of its kind, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
According to this report, they found that online prices have gone up over 3% year over year as of July 2021. And although 3.1% doesn't sound like a lot, in fact, that's approximately in line with annual inflation in the US for a number of years, a bit higher than annual inflation, but it's nothing extreme. This is actually quite a change from prices online in the past. In fact, for the past several years, online prices have been falling significantly. Up until the pandemic, online prices were down approximately 20% versus January of 2014, while the total economy inflation index, the consumer price index, was up approximately 10%. So online prices have been steadily falling over the years, but in the past year, online prices have started to go up. And this is true across 18 different categories, or rather 17 different categories of products as defined by Adobe, except for one, which was office supplies. Not surprisingly, office supplies have not seen any price inflation because obviously very few people are going to office spaces thanks to the pandemic.
Yep. So. Well, this does seem to fit in with a lot of other people. Boy, it really looks bad for the Democrats, right? We got COVID coming back. We got this mess in Afghanistan and inflation is going up. I think we're going to get more Trump.
Well, it's a real possibility. Yeah, people don't like inflation, even though inflation's been a serious problem, at least for certain types of assets for 15, 20 years now, like with housing in particular.
Yeah.
It's becoming more visible. I think once like milk prices go up and gas prices go up, then
Yeah.
people start to complain about that.
Yeah. The Democratic strategists I heard about said that what's going on is Trump is not bothering, or I mean, Biden is not bothering with voting rights or anything, because he's putting all his eggs in infrastructure, saying if we deliver on infrastructure, everybody will love us and we'll win the midterms, and nothing else really matters. And I said, well, I don't know.
Yeah, that reminds me of all the hot takes after the 2016 presidential election, when people were talking about, pundits were talking about the economically precarious Trump voter who was motivated because they did not like the economic policies of the Obama administration. Just nonsense.
And you don't think there was any truth in that?
No, I don't.
Well, I've been trying to figure out, I was actually talking to a German just yesterday saying, I said, we're going nuts over here. And he said, yeah, well, one place where we can help you is we've had some practice explaining this kind of thing to the future generations, so we can help you there.
Yeah,
and I said, it was 6 years ago, I told my students that there were only 1% Nazis in America and they would never gain power and it could never happen here. And I've gotten over all that.
Yeah.
It totally can happen here. It totally is happening right in front of us. And I think it's probably driven economically. I mean, what has made the world go mad? I would think it's fundamentally that the younger generations don't have jobs or something. You don't think so?
Well, I was going to say that the whole idea of economic anxiety is sort of scapegoating or hiding very racist intentions under the rug.
Well, there's just something that I think I heard somebody say a week or so ago, I thought was pretty good. He said, when people are really desperate and really miserable, then they start doing stupid things like gambling and racism and stuff and blaming immigrants and taking stupid drugs. And I think obviously we have a lot of people that are really miserable in America, so they're doing all this stupid stuff.
Here's the thing, though. There's a lot of miserable people who are not doing stupid stuff.
Well,
okay. And so it's not even an explanation.
Well, I would like an explanation, because it's not even just America. There's these right-wing, these demagogues that are basically Nazis ascending all over the world. There's some kind of pressure making it happen, and didn't happen a few decades ago. And I wonder if it's just that people got old and forgot about World War II and they want to do it all over again. I'd like to know what pressure is making this happen.
Well,
yeah.
With that in mind, I will talk about in our next podcast on Friday.
Yeah.
I'll talk about a journal article that I've read recently titled Activating Animus, the Uniquely Social Roots of Trump Support.
Yes.
And
I would like to know what's driving it. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, this is a really interesting study. So
yeah,
we can talk about that on Friday.
When I was a young man, I read this book by Clark or Asimov, where he's projected a future foundation, where he projected a future in which politics and sociology finally become a science, and we can understand what drives it. And then you can have a controlled society. And I'm sort of watching for that to happen. If we could only understand why things like this happen, maybe we could do something about it. Anyway, now we're down to, so there was this article that got a lot of attention where he's one of the people that spy on Apple and see what's coming up concluded that the iPhone 13 is going to have satellite telephony. And I said, well, that sounds pretty screwy. And then Kaitlyn said, you can't possibly communicate with a satellite with that tiny little antenna. And I said, well, that might be right. And so Rob Graham came out and explained it. It's not going to talk to satellites. What's happening is one of the satellite bands is being repurposed for phone communication, and it's going to talk on that band. And this, of course, means that the other gadgets currently talking to satellites are all going to get messed up. And apparently it's used by watches. There's some kind of watch you can get that will beacon to satellites when you like fall down and get stuck while hiking. And apparently it's going to mess up those watches. But anyway, it's an interesting story in the radio spectrum and stuff, explaining how the new iPhone is going to use the new spectrum, which is apparently the upper half of channel 14, which is not really used very much in Wi-Fi. Not used at all in America and only used in a few countries in Europe.
So I was going to say, Yeah, no. So you can, at least receive some data from satellites and stuff. But the problem is you're talking about like GPS level, like data rates, where it's like almost nothing. You can't really do anything useful with a compromised antenna. If you really want to get some good data rates with satellites overhead, the type of antenna and equipment you would need would be probably more powerful and much too big to fit in your pocket. So.
Oh, and so the watch doesn't really have to send more than a few bytes of data up saying help.
Right, exactly. So if it's something very, very small, very, just a small beacon, like I said, like GPS, you could do something like that.
Yeah.
Where you could receive and you can definitely receive, but like if you want to do like any actual like communications, talk on the phone,
Yeah.
it's that, you kind of technology will improve, but at the moment it's still kind of a pipe dream.
But then you need a real sat phone, which is the size of a briefcase, right?
Or one of those 90s cell phones, the big brick,
Right.
the thing that sticks out the antenna.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. And so Liz has got a cloud balancer.
Yeah, this was actually kind of just a funny little story about how random things can go wrong. There's a service called the Spaghetti Detective, where if you've got a 3D printer, you can sign up for this, and they use AI to determine whether the 3D print that you're executing at that time will have print errors and stop the print before you waste all of your 3D printing media, which is pretty cool in theory, but there was a problem with this, where their admin made a mistake with a load balancer configuration, which essentially put all of the printers that were on the service at that time and made it as if they were all on the same local network, and so people could print stuff on each other's 3D printers, and that's definitely not good. But it would be pretty. I can think of some pretty fun ways to prank your friends with that.
This reminds me of the early cable networks where you were on the same LAN with everybody else and you could see their shared files and printers and everything.
Right, exactly. So it can still happen.
I see it happen at airports and coffee houses. Thing pops up. Would you like to display this on Joe Smith's iPhone or Mac? And I could click the button and do that apparently.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny too when you think about the fact that this still goes on, and it can still happen with stuff like 3D printers.
Yeah, the joy of networking.
For some reason, people like on public transit seem to get very offended when I try to send them pictures of my kitty cat using the Apple Share. It's like, don't you want to see my kitty cat? Right,
and at least it's just cat pictures. I mean, at least you're not sending anything rude or offensive. I mean,
yeah,
who doesn't want to see cute cat pictures?
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, I remember I think after DEF CON, I went to the airport and somebody was sending pictures of Pepe the Frog to people,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
I'd rather see a picture of Kaitlyn's cat than Pepe.
Yep. Well, Kaitlyn is telling us the ISS is falling apart.
Yep, again. So space is hard. I keep reiterating this over and over again. And once again, we find out just how hard it is. So the ISS, which has been having a few problems recently, mainly I'm referring to the fact that one of the docked rockets started firing and tilting it out of whack for a little bit. Anyway, that's been taken care of, and now a new problem has come up. There are some superficial fissures. By the way, this is from Reuters news.
Reuters. Routers are different. Those are what hacked the election.
Yes. Anyway, yes. Anyway, so there's a excuse my mispronunciation. So yeah, there's a crack in the Zarya module, which is the first sort of main Russian module that went up. Now, I don't know if there's any air being leaked at the moment, whether these cracks are that bad, but it definitely needs maintenance. So just like all equipment, the International Space Station needs maintenance as well. And these cracks are becoming very worrisome because it begs the question, or I should say it begets the question, how long can we really maintain the International Space Station before we have to put something new up? And I think, it really wasn't designed to go past like 2020 or 2025. And so, and then at what point does it become too expensive to maintain this old equipment? So on and so forth. So, and I know that places like NASA are planning to put a space station around the moon. And so will they have the budget and time to work on the International Space Station or anything close to Earth? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, so they're up there with Bondo or Fix-A-Flat or something.
Yeah, they'll use duct tape and get
Yeah.
it working together. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, all right, and Irvin has Synology.
There is a CVE for Synology, and this affects the latest version of Synology, which I found to be kind of funny. That you can do a denial of service attack and get into those boxes, even on the new version through OpenSSL.
So what is Synology?
Synology is a company that makes NAS devices.
Oh, I've been hearing a lot of Bowne reports about NAS devices.
Yeah, people just connect them to the internet as is.
Well, that's kind of the whole point of them, right?
That's a feature of them, but it's not the whole point of them. I mean, I have one, but I don't have it connected to the internet.
So how do you get your stuff when you're not there? Go through a VPN?
I use a jump box.
Yeah, well, that would probably be a better plan. Okay.
That way my stuff stays behind the firewall and nice and safe. But anyway, for those of you who are using Synology and connected out to the internet, there is a bug out there.
Yep, but this is just a DOS bug. Although 8.1, I thought it had to be more than a DOS.
Yeah, it's more than a DOS because it's a possible DOS through SSL or through SSH.
Yeah, yeah. All right. All right, and Alan has got, oh yes, the Marin COVID outbreak.
The Marin Elementary School COVID outbreak. Yes, it's been making the rounds in COVID Twitter for a little while when it was in preprint. The CDC has released it now as an early release report. And this is a report on an elementary school teacher in Marin who apparently infected 12 students in their classroom. And those 12 students went on to infect about a dozen other people. So it's a significant outbreak based on just a single person starting this chain of infections. This happened back in May of 2021, and the teacher was not vaccinated at the time. Started feeling a little sick, just very slightly sick, but went to school regardless and continued to teach in the classroom. And at times was taking off their mask, even though the Marin School District mandates that all people keep their masks on. The teacher took off their mask to read aloud to the students. And this went on for a couple of days before the teacher finally got a COVID test, which came back positive. And then, well, that was the seed or germ of this whole report. Now, a few interesting consequences for epidemiological consequences of this, or knowledge of COVID and the Delta variant. Marin County is actually one of the more enlightened places when it comes to infection control and COVID infection control. And so all classrooms have an air filter in them and also have their windows open and doors open, and masking is required of both teachers and students. So they did everything about as right as you possibly can.
Mhm.
And yet in this classroom of 24 students, 12 of the students got infected by this one teacher. So that really goes to show just how transmissible the Delta variant is. You can do everything right, as the Marin County school is doing, except for the teacher taking off their mask. That's the one part where things went wrong, and the fact that the teacher went in while symptomatic too. But all these other controls were in place, and yet you still had a 50% attack rate in a classroom.
Are you telling me the students narked on the teacher and told them, yeah, she took off her mask?
No, the teacher notified the school district notified the CDC, or notified the local health department. The health department checked up on everybody.
Well, this, yeah, but you know, the University of Illinois says they were open all last semester and everything's fine because they have these special rapid tests that they give everybody, like every couple days.
Yeah. Although some universities did far worse than that too.
This makes me think of the whole thing going on in Florida right now, how DeSantis is punishing school districts with mask mandates. Like,
And he's going through.
oh, you might want to walk this back, dude.
Well, I've seen some people say that he's losing popularity in Florida, but this reminds me of Buttigieg you were telling me about. This is usually how you go to national office, is by betraying your own state. So they hate you because who cares? You do what'll get you on the bigger stage.
Right.
So the fact that people in Florida hate him is probably a sign of progress towards becoming president, which, you know, he's the second in line for president. It's all, if Trump doesn't win, it'll be him. If Trump doesn't run, it'll be him, apparently. Anyway.
Hooray.
But I mean, that, Ellen, wasn't the crux of this report that the biggest problem was the teacher taking off her mask?
Yeah, certainly that if the teacher had not removed their mask, then who knows what would have happened.
Well, you know what I think?
Masks do work.
The problem is the teacher not being vaccinated.
Well, that's part of the problem too. This was mid-May, mid to late May.
Yeah,
So
because
still early in the vaccine rollout. But
Yeah, but
teachers
at
were
that-
eligible at that point.
Yeah, it was, and every teacher I know that wanted one had one by May.
but they should simply require it for all teachers and all staff in schools, obviously, because the children can't get vaccinated.
Yes.
I mean, this is madness.
Yeah, and I mean, for teachers that can't, like, here's what I think is, you know, for teachers that can't get it or don't, you know, really don't want to get it, there are still kids who have to study remote because either they're immunocompromised or their parents or guardians are immunocompromised. So have those teachers that don't want to get it or can't get it, have them lead the online classes. I mean, it seems kind of, you know, I don't understand why, you know, stuff like this has to pose such a huge logistical problem.
Well, I think we really have to get with it with the vaccine mandates, because I think it's clear now that this is never going away. We're going to be dealing with COVID for the next 5 or 10 years. We just need to get used to it. And I think the most reasonable thing is lots of vaccine mandates.
Yeah, I mean, they make you take a TB test before you teach anything in California, even online. You have to have a TB test.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And one other thing I need to mention here is that there are a lot of breakthrough infections too. For even people who are fully vaccinated, there are breakthrough infections.
Well, I've
And-
heard people say the rate is less than 1%.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. There are fewer breakthrough infections than.
So that's that would
Otherwise.
be a huge difference, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it still does happen.
Well, of course.
And people who are working in higher risk professions and environments like healthcare providers are at greater risk, certainly, of having a breakthrough infection.
Yeah.
And I would also think that people spending a lot of time indoors in close proximity, like teachers and students in the classroom, are also at higher risk. So as good as wearing a mask is, there needs to be more of an emphasis on people wearing high quality masks like N95 masks. And
that would
very
be
few
good
people
too.
do, it seems.
Yeah.
Even though N95 masks are more available now than they were at the beginning of the pandemic. It's not they became harder to get in late July, early August, but you can still get an N95 mask. And people really should be wearing N95 because they are demonstrably far more effective than any cloth mask can be.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so I've got this diffusion models, which I thought is pretty awesome. This is like the thing they show in movies. You can take a blurry picture and completely restore it. And the technique they use to do this is apparently magic. I mean, it's using machine learning. And what they did was take high precision pictures and add noise and have the thing practice removing noise until it developed its own algorithm to remove noise. And then they gave it blurry pictures and it sharpened them. And they looked so good that when you compare the de-blurred picture to the original and have humans choose which one looks really good, they can't tell the difference anymore. So that is pretty amazing. That's straight out of science fiction where they say, can you like sharpen that picture and magically it turns into a beautiful picture? That has not been possible before. In fact, it's fundamentally impossible, right? Because the data is missing. You do not have all the evidence you need in a blurry picture, but apparently the machine learning models are able to learn like how to guess what the shape would be behind that. So this may be quite useful. It would help improve those biometrics that we were talking about earlier. So you kill the right person. Anyway. All right. And so then Apple cares about privacy, according to Liz.
Yeah, they care about privacy unless you're an employee. The issue there's a really good article in The Verge. It's kind of lengthy, but it's a good read. And it talks about the way that Apple employees are essentially, I think that there are some issues with the way that with the way they have to sign up. So when they get employed at Apple, they're pretty much pressured into linking their personal iCloud account to all of their work devices. And part of the reason for this is dog fooding, because they're testing out features where if you're testing it on, as they say anyway, if you're testing it on your work device, it's not going to really work for testing purposes because they need you to use it in the same way that any standard user off the street would be using their phone. So they need you to test it on your regular personal phone, which is a little creepy to begin with, because then they have access to all your photos and emails and documents and everything. And then when you go to quit your job and move on in a few years, their policy is when you turn your work machines back in, you're not supposed to wipe the hard drives. So if you've got your personal iCloud synced up with your work account, all of your stuff is on your work laptop then. And, for some strange reason, some of the employees don't feel so hot about turning over this device that may be full of like nudes and tax documents and, all manner of sensitive info over to the corporate office when they quit.
This is a fundamental problem with Apple and has been from the beginning, is they do not understand that work is different than the rest of your life.
Right.
One company that does understand is Microsoft. Microsoft does have a good system for their, whatever their equivalent to iCloud is, SkyDrive, they used to call it, then they changed the name a few times, where your documents are marked personal or work, and they're treated differently. And when you're no longer employed, you can't get to the work documents, but you can still get to the personal documents. And, Apple needs to wake up to this. A similar thing, if you want to have a company Apple machine that's shared by many people, there's no way to do it. You have to tie it to one person's iCloud, which is not the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a debate going on, like, hey, can't we just get a work iCloud account, which you'd think would be the sensible solution to this, but there's debate against it, and there's pushback against it. And I can see that, when you're an employee, to some extent, I guess, what you're signing up for. But on the other hand, I mean, that's pretty darn invasive.
Yeah. They all have their blind spots. Google had a similar blind spot. They thought that everybody, whoever you're sending a few Gmails to, should be slammed and called your friend and told everything about you and stuff. There's a bunch of these tech firms that don't understand that people have like different parts of their life that have to be compartmentalized.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of insane too when you think about the fact that your boss can like literally track your whereabouts at any given time and your activity and everything else. And I'm not sure, some management is pretty toxic, and not sure I want to sign up for that.
Oh, you've even got love triangles and deranged jealous exes at the workplace and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you're the you every so often you'll run into the occasional first middle manager who's just completely lacking in any kind of ethics or scruples. And I'm sure they have controls in place to prevent abuse and access, but it's still a little scary.
Well, I think especially these days when people are so extremely hostile over politics, there's a bunch of people that have enemies that are stalking them and hunting them down and trying to find them for various
Yeah.
crazy reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that's kind of crazy is if you think about it, good luck, let's say, for example, you've got your 9 to 5 at Apple, but then you're doing sensitive work, like maybe you're doing some contract work outside of it that may be sensitive, like.
Yeah.
I guess you have to have a whole separate set of devices for that.
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's people. This is a problem with Facebook too, with their real name policy and everything. A bunch of internet companies do not accept the real complexity of people's lives. All right. And so Kaitlyn has got hate raids.
Yes, hate raids on Twitch. Sorry, that took a second. My monitor always takes a few seconds to switch over. Anyway, so Twitch is having a bit of an issue, and I don't mean a bit, I mean a big issue with hate raids going on the platform. Basically what happens is that a bunch of hate groups come together and they sort of attack Twitch streamers, particularly Twitch streamers who are not white, straight males. So anyone who's like a person of color, women, LGBT people, they all get sort of piled on and abused by these raids. And I linked to an article by the Instinct about this, written by Devin Randall, talking about this. And there are a lot of examples of what goes on in these Twitch streams, but it's a big problem. I mean, it's happening all over the place. And people are just getting abused off the platform. People are quitting, and Twitch seems very unresponsive to the whole issue. And it seems pretty simple to like write some AI scripts or some basic universal moderation where if someone's typing certain swear words or certain derogatory words over and over again, that's probably a raid. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, if you look at some of the screenshots, it's derogatory slurs over and over and over again. Like it's the same things over and over again by different people. It should be pretty easy to catch. It's not. And supposedly it gets even more difficult because they can like post these things apparently like when people are out of the channel, and then the people that own the channel can like get in trouble for it, and not the people that went and raided. I'm not sure exactly how that works, so don't quote me on it. But it is a big problem right now. I just want to sort of shine more light on it so that hopefully Twitch will do something about the harassment.
Yeah, and I know this goes all the way back. I've heard people arguing about Gamergate, and they said even the very first internet society, the Well, which was like 500 people in like the 90s, by the time you get up to a policy, oh, at 200, now you got trolls and all this jazz.
I mean, the problem is that, I mean, there's a difference between trolling, which is cute and funny or whatever, and being and saying racist and, you know, misogynistic and you know, homophobic things, right?
Just seems like a difference in scale to me, not really.
Well, I mean, one is sort of an act of violence, right? It's not direct violence, but it encourages violence against these groups of people who are already, you know, face increased violence, you know, already. So I would, you know, I mean, it's not just an increase of scale. It's its own thing, really.
Yeah, well, anyway, definitely messes up people's lives. Like people have to go into hiding. And this is why the main thing I notice is all the women on social media pretty much vanish before long. They pretty much just give up. A lot of them, a lot of technical women are there and then they just give up and leave or go private or something because they have to put up with so much abuse. Yeah. And nobody seems to be doing anything productive to solve it. Not Twitter, not Facebook, not anybody. Anyway, so Microsoft is going to withhold Windows 11 updates. You know, who wants the stinking Microsoft updates anyway? Everybody I know has to block them.
Right? So two things. Windows 11 is coming out October 5th
Yeah.
officially as a free upgrade. But
And are they going to force you to take it and ram it through the update, whether you like it or not, like they tend to do?
supposedly they're gonna do it in stages.
Yeah, it sounds like they're forcing it.
Yes, yeah, sounds like they're forcing it. They're gonna force it on anything that is Intel 8th gen and up.
Oh,
But
good.
then,
So all you need to do is have old hardware, and then you won't be forced to go to Windows 11.
yes, that's kind of the thing. If you want to do updates at a certain point, Microsoft is basically saying you're gonna have to download an ISO and reinstall Windows every time. Or you just won't be able to get updates at all.
Well, ever since Windows 10 came out, everybody I deal with had to block the updates because they keep breaking everything.
Yeah, yeah, the updates haven't quite been as helpful. So that looks like that's where Microsoft is standing now. Windows 11 coming out in a month or so,
Yeah.
and some people will get it by force. Some people will be told, "Hey, go buy a new computer because yours is too old." And you may get updates, you may not. And others will just have to download ISOs and reinstall Windows every time.
But people told me the Windows 11 is going to be Vista all over again, and I think so because the previews I tried just a few months ago were horrible. So I don't think it's going to be ready in a month. I think they're going to push it out, and there's going to be a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's definitely the new Windows.
Yeah, yeah. All right, and
Oh,
Alan,
sorry, the new Windows Vista.
yeah, new Vista, and here's a real blast from the past. Alan's got SCO.
Yeah, Santa Cruz operation.
Hasn't it
The
been gone for like 20 years?
no, IP never dies. Patents never die. SCO, Santa Cruz operation, which kind of in a weird convoluted chain of events inherited Unix from AT&T, went out of business in like 2001 or something like that, 2003.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell?
And was subsequently bought up by at least one other entity, which purchased it for the sole purpose of litigation. And the backstory is so lengthy that there's no point in even trying to explain it all.
But it was secretly funded by Microsoft, right? That was the point.
Pardon?
It was secretly funded by Microsoft, I think.
Oh, was it really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Microsoft denied it for years, and it came out that they had secretly funded this lawsuit in order to get people afraid to use Linux.
I see. Well, you know, there are so many players in this game, and the stakes are so high because, just to give the briefest background, SCO owned Unix essentially, and they teamed up with IBM and some other companies to work on this new project. that was going to be this major operating system for servers, essentially, and a continuation of Unix, but new. And around like 2001, IBM concluded this is not going to work out, and Linux is the future. So we're going to pull out of this project, and we're going to support Linux from now on. And not only that, we are going to contribute some of the code we wrote on this project, this Unix project with SCO. We're going to contribute that code to the Linux project, which was a huge mistake from a legal standpoint. Maybe from a technical standpoint, it was good, but from a legal standpoint, it was awful, because SCO was then in a position to sue IBM and potentially Linux, claiming that IBM had illegally contributed code that rightfully belonged to this project, this Unix project, and by extension, SCO. And so that could have very easily shut down all of Linux, or at least everybody using Linux would have owed SCO some money. So this has been hanging over Linux for decades,
Yep.
but apparently SCO and IBM have reached an agreement, and they have settled the case. And IBM is going to pay SCO $12.5 million, and that will be the end of the story.
So finally, they're no longer legal cloud over using Unix and Linux, supposedly.
Well, at least there's less of a cloud. But if you want to use Unix, you still can. You just have to pay for it. And you can pay SCO for that privilege too, because I guess they do still sell Unix for x86 CPUs.
Well, you know, another thing that's there, which Bill Gates was always complaining about, is all the drivers for all the hardware in Linux are essentially stolen from Windows drivers.
Oh,
He said the whole Linux community is nothing but piracy on a grand scale. And there's some legal truth to that.
Functionally, I don't know if that's true. Windows drivers are always so awful, and it seems like the Linux drivers are somewhat better.
Well, but the way you make a Linux driver, right? Since nobody makes hardware with Linux drivers hardly, they only give you a Windows driver. So the only way you make the Linux driver is by reverse engineering the Windows driver to figure out what needs to be done.
Right. But that's not exactly illegal necessarily, so long as they don't reuse any code.
Well, that's what they're arguing in court, just like this court case.
Oh,
There
okay,
is an
yeah.
argument. And, you know, it would just depend on how expensive your lawyer is. Anyway, all right. And so the last one is the open source insulin, which sounds pretty awesome. As we all know, there's a ton of people that need insulin, and the pharmaceutical companies just rack up the price more and more and more until it's insanely expensive and people try to do without their insulin, which is really a bad idea. If you need insulin, trying not to take your insulin is very, very bad for you. And so the open source biohackers are trying to make small homemade insulins. Apparently, the process to make insulin is pretty complicated, although it no longer requires thousands of pigs the way it used to. But it requires genetically modified bacteria to grow the insulin, and then a purification process. So they say you can't really get it down to a typical backyard project, but you can get it down to $1 million. And then they said if you could get like a few thousand diabetics together to contribute, they could make their own. And this might be a way to rebel against the organized pharmaceutical industry that does seem determined to jack up the price until a lot of people die. So anyway, I hope that works out. I know plenty of diabetics. I think everybody does, and they all have real trouble getting their insulin. So if there was a more diversified, cheaper option, that would be good. Anyway, all right, that's it for this one, and we'll be back on Tuesday when Alan will figure out why the world is going nuts, which I'm
We'll be back on Tuesday.
Wait, is it not Tuesday today? Oh, Friday. Yeah, Friday. Good. I'm glad you can keep track of these things.
We'll be back on Friday now, huh?
Well, that was my plan. Now you're confusing me.
But I thought it was Thursday.
No, it's Friday. You guys are to me. I have a hard time keeping track of things anyway. And here you all pick on me.
It's COVID. You know, time has no more meaning. So we'll be back at some time in the supposed future or the past.
No respect. That's what I
Yes.
get. No respect. All right, farewell.